Whenever I'm contemplating changing my camera, it's something that I give a lot of thought to. And if I'm contemplating changing camera systems completely, so for example one manufacturer to another, and it involves changing my lenses as well, I obviously give that a lot more thought, and there's often some reasons behind it to compel me to do so. So I've recently made this switch. I've went from Fuji, my X-T4, to Nikon and the Z7 II. So in this video, and hopefully it'll be of interest to a few people, I want to talk about why I've changed, the reasons behind it, and I also want to talk about which lenses I've bought so far and what I intend to purchase in the future. So I hope you enjoy this and find it interesting. But the main thing for me today is that this is going to be my first time out with the Nikon Z7 II. It's my first landscape photography shoot. I've done a lot of testing of the camera at home and in the garden, but you can't beat being out in the real world environment giving a camera a good try. So hopefully I'll find a nice image and get off to a good start with this new camera. So it's going to be interesting today to see how the light pans out. I've had moments where it's been very overcast, then we've got moments like it is now where the sun's coming out. So hopefully, fingers crossed, the light will still be good as the day progresses. But the first thing that got me thinking about changing camera from my Fuji X-T4 is that over the last year or so I've had a few requests which has disappointed me, that I felt I was unable to meet the requests of some customers. So I've had a couple of people ask me if I could provide much larger versions of some of my images than I currently do, specifically A1 format. And I also had someone approach me asking if I could photograph a scene that's very special to them, and they wanted a huge print of it for their living room wall. And while I felt I could obviously do these things, I thought it was just stretching the images from the Fuji X-T4 too much to be able to meet those requests. And when it comes to printing really large, there's obviously a few things to consider. We've got DPI, we've got viewing distance, we've got the sensor size in terms of megapixels, and is it a full frame, is it an APS-C, what's the quality going to look like when it's been really printed large. And of course you can resize images, and there's various software, and I of course can print the A1 from my Fuji X-T4 when I had it, but for me personally I just didn't feel comfortable providing those prints. I wanted something full frame with more megapixels, and I wanted the prints to look fantastic really close up and also fantastic at further viewing distances. So while I love the X-T4, and while I don't see this as particularly profitable, I don't think I'm going to make a lot of money from it, just because I'm a photographer like many who's proud of their work. I just felt really disappointed that I couldn't meet these requests. Now, as I say, I'm only expecting to get a very small amount of requests such as this throughout a year. It's not going to be a profitable exercise, but just through pride of my own work, I just wanted to be able to meet those requests. Also in my own home, there's a spot in my living room that I've had my eye on for many months, and I can envisage having a really large print that up on the wall, one of my own, that means something very special to me. So hopefully moving forward I'll take something like that that resonates with me on the Nikon Z7 II, and it'll occupy that space. But yeah, that's the first thing that got me thinking about changing camera. The next reason that got me thinking about changing from my Fuji X-T4 is wildlife photography. So I love doing wildlife photography. I do spend most of my time doing landscape photography, but I do spend a lot of time doing wildlife as well, and I've been doing more of that in recent months. And while the X-T4 does that job fine, I found it best when I could keep the ISO low. So more when I'm shooting slower moving wildlife such as deer, birds perched in a tree or rock or whatever. But when I wanted to use very fast shutter speeds and I was forced to raise that ISO up to high levels, I wasn't satisfied 100% with the amount of noise I was getting in my images. And I'm aware there's plenty of software can remove noise and probably does a fantastic job. And it's not the fault of the XT4, it's got a wonderful sensor on it. It's just more what goes with the territory of an APS-C sensor, in my opinion. So I really felt that to get the most out of my wildlife photography, I would benefit from moving to a full frame sensor, which would perform better when using very high ISO values. And I'd also get that benefit in my landscape photography as well, if I'm shooting in low light or when I'm using really fast shutter speeds to freeze motion and so on. The next reason related to wildlife is that I absolutely love looking at my images of wildlife. When you're out walking about, you can maybe see an osprey in the distance and watch it diving for fish, and it's fantastic to see that. But when you can actually zoom in really close on your camera, go home, review those images and see all the detail that you can't see with your naked eye, it really is a treat, and it's something I get a lot of enjoyment from. And obviously moving to a full frame sensor, that's going to let me see that detail a bit better. It's going to provide more clarity and detail in my images. Again, it just goes with moving to a full frame sensor. And again, I'll benefit from that in my landscape images as well. You may not see these things in a small A4 print, but if you're printing really large or looking at the images at 100% on a large monitor, you do notice these things, and I do appreciate detail and I enjoy looking at that sort of thing in my photography, in my images. Now, of course, if I was spending most of my time doing wildlife photography, the Nikon Z7 II wouldn't have been my main choice. I might have went for something like a Nikon D850, but because I'm spending most of my time doing landscape photography and a bit of time doing wildlife photography, I think this camera is an all-in-one nice solution for my needs. So the light at the moment is still quite nice. It's nice and soft and gentle at the moment, some diffused light, and I hope it continues to stay like that for the rest of the day or even improves. That would be nice. But anyway, I want to talk in this section about my final reasons for wanting to change camera, and that is to do with weight and quality and the balance between the two, and also talk about the lenses I bought for the Z7 Mark II. But first I want to talk about my own preferences in photography to give a little background to this. So if we talk in full frame terms, the lens that I like to use most is a 24-70. I take most of my images with that lens. I absolutely love those focal lengths in that range. Then it would be a 70-200, and least used would be ultra wide angle, which may surprise some, but that's just how I like to shoot at the moment. That may change, of course, and I do love ultra wide angle photography, but for me, I don't do it an awful lot. So when it came to getting the Z7 Mark II, I kept that in mind, and that really influenced my choice of lenses, as did trying to keep weight down. But I want to go back a little bit and talk about why I bought the XT4 and why, if the Z7 Mark II had been available at that time with the lenses that I wanted, I would have changed to that camera then instead of the XT4. So prior to the Fuji, I had the Canon 5D Mark IV. Loved the camera, 30 megapixels I believe, if I remember correctly, and of course full frame. And I was doing some portrait and wedding photography and also landscape and wildlife back then. I now just do landscape and wildlife. So I had a lovely set of Canon f2.8 lenses, loved them, but they were very heavy for lugging around doing landscapes. And I wanted to go mirrorless, and I wanted to save weight as well. And I think back at the time, if I remember correctly, if you wanted to go mirrorless in full frame, you might have saved 150 grams or so on the camera body, but the lenses weren't any lighter. So there was no real point. So to save weight, I felt I had to go to an APS-C camera and to go mirrorless as well. And the Fuji X-T4 was the best choice for me. But obviously coming from that Canon full frame 30 megapixel to the Fuji, I wanted to maintain quality as much as I could. I knew I would lose a little bit, but I wanted to maintain as much as I could. So I went for the Fuji f2.8 lenses. They were better quality, a bit heavier, but overall I still saved a lot of weight, especially when you consider the weight saving I made for my wildlife photography. And I loved those lenses, produce wonderful images, so I'm glad I bought those over their cheaper, lighter alternatives. Another main reason is that, as I say, 24 to 70 is my most used focal length range in full frame terms. And if I'd went for the lighter option in the Fuji X-T4, I think it started at 18 millimeters, so not as wide as my 16. So those are the reasons I bought what I did. Still saved weight, smaller lenses, smaller camera, and maintained quality. But had the Nikon Z7 Mark II been out, I would have went straight to it. I jumped to 45 megapixels in the sensor, still full frame, and I really like what Nikon's been able to do in terms of their pricing and been able to produce lightweight lenses. So on the camera at the moment, I'm filming with it is the f4Z lens, the 24 to 70. And then I've bought here the 24 to 200. Now there's not an f4 70 to 200 available at the moment for the Z mount, and I didn't want to use an adapter or anything, so I'm holding off. Hopefully that'll come out at some point, but I'll have a tough choice deciding if I want to get that lens or not. But I'll put some figures up on the screen. I don't want to drag out this section, but if you look at the weight of the camera with these two lenses versus what I was even using in the Fuji, I've saved weight and gained an image quality with a full frame sensor. Yes, I know these are not the f2.8 optimal quality Nikon lenses, but the quality is still fantastic. And I've been testing them at home, and I've been really impressed with the 24 to 200. I think the image quality is going to be adequate for me, more than adequate. I think it performs worst at its widest focal length from what I've seen so far. But my plan is to use the 24 to 70 f4 as much as possible. Then when I need something more than 70 millimeters, switch to this one. And down the line, I can see me getting a Z mount wildlife lens, or you can use it for landscapes as well, but something with much longer focal length. I can see that on the roadmap, so I'll probably get one of those in the future. And I think it's the 14 to 30 f4 lens, so I think I'll get that one in the future to cover ultra wide angle as well. And I don't want to bore people and talk about numbers and figures and so on, but I've made a huge weight saving. I've still got fantastic quality, and I'm quite pleased with my decision at this point in time. And I can see some really light setups. I mean, if I take the camera body and the 24 to 200 only, yes, I know it's not the best quality in Nikon lens, but the quality is still excellent. And I could shoot all day almost anywhere with that focal length range, and it's extremely light. I can also see me going out with the f4 14 to 30 millimeter lens in future, and this one. So I've got everything from 14 millimeter up to 200 millimeters on a full frame camera, covering all that range in a very light setup compared to thinking back in the Canon days, what I would have needed to carry my DSLR. And it's also much lighter than what I was using on the Fuji. And I think it even compares nicely to the very lightest lenses I could have got in the Fuji. But obviously, full frame camera is going to be a very good balance between weight and quality. So that's what I've bought. Those are my reasons why. And the most important thing, though, obviously, is the photography itself. So I'm now going to have a look and see what my first photo is going to be on this dedicated landscape photography outing. For those of us who do photography for a living or enjoy it passionately as a hobby, gear does indeed matter, be it to help save weight for long hikes, to give us more dynamic range, or simply to provide features which help our workflow, there will always be a setup which suits and helps us as individuals. However, at this point in the video, I'd like to say that taking photographs, and more specifically photographs that we are personally pleased with, is the most important thing. I've owned a number of different cameras over the years with significantly different specifications, and with each one I have taken photographs that I am proud of and which bring back special memories to me. That will always be my priority. So I just stopped for a few minutes to capture what really was a breathtaking scene off to my right. I can't point the camera in that direction, the dynamic range is huge, but it really looks spectacular. A peak nestled in amongst the hills and mountains with some sun rays in the background. It really did look spectacular, so I thought it was worth taking a shot. And I've captured this one with the 24 to 200mm lens. I think from memory I was at something around 135mm. And I just want to talk a little bit more briefly about that lens. As I say, I've only done some testing at home at the moment, so I would like to wait a few months and give it a lot of use before forming a solid opinion on it. But as I say, when I bought the Z7 II, there was no 70 to 200 f4 lens. And I've been making a conscious decision for a few years now to keep my weight as low as possible in my kit, but still try and keep the quality high. Now, I don't think I need the f2.8 lenses. They're fantastic quality, the Nikon lenses, but they're quite expensive and they're heavy. And I'm trying to keep the quality up but the weight down. So you need to make compromises. Now, having done some testing at home, I compared the 24 to 70 range to the 24 to 70mm f4 lens, and the 24 to 70 f4 is a better lens, and there's some issues I can see with this one. Minor issues I can fix mostly in post-production, but the quality is really good from what I've seen. And the coming months will answer this question, but the question I need to ask myself is, if Nikon do release a 70 to 200mm f4 lens in the future, I think I've got three options. One is I'm happy with this lens, I do nothing, just keep using it. Two is I swap it for that f4 lens if I think there's an advantage. Or the third option is buy it in addition to this lens. And I think this lens gives me fantastic options. I could go out all day and shoot with it. Covers the majority of the focal length range that I shoot at most of the time. If I'm going out scouting, and the quality is still fantastic on this lens, but if I'm purely scouting and I don't need to bring my very best lenses, I could go out just with this lens. I have the option, as I touched on earlier, of getting, I think it's the 14 to 30, and then using this one, the 24 to 200. It gives me a lot of options and some very lightweight options for my kit. So this is the first shot that I've taken with it, and it was a pretty spectacular scene, so hopefully it's produced a nice image. But yeah, quite an interesting option for me in terms of good quality and very lightweight and a large focal length range. So I've found a spot from which I'm going to take my final photographs for today, and it's this beautiful scene behind me here. It's really nice. We've got some nice light, and the clouds and light has been changing since I've arrived here. I'm going to wait a while longer if I can tolerate these midges, and just see how the sky and light goes in the next while. For this shot I'm at roughly 60mm, so I've changed back to the 24 to 70 f4 lens. I just want to take a few images with both lenses today while I'm out to do that real world test that I talked about. But yeah, it's a really nice scene. I've got this lovely valley off in the distance, some really nice atmospheric clouds, and I've got a nice Scots pine off to the left of my frame as well, and we've got a nice variety of colour off in the distance as well. I can see some cloud where the sun is beginning to set, so the scene could darken and I could lose the light in maybe 30 minutes or so, but it's definitely worth hanging around just to see if I can capture this at its best. But the midges really are starting to become a pain now, so this will be my final image for today. But as always, I want to thank you just for taking the time to watch the video. I truly do appreciate it. It's been great for me out to test the Nikon Z7 II for the first time, and I hope you've got something from the video, maybe some useful information, or at least found it enjoyable to watch. But thank you so much as always, and I'll see you in my next one.